Well, 17.4 million households deemed food insecure last year. That's according to the USDA's report out this week. Children were affected in more than 4 million of those homes. David Beckman is the 2010 World Food Prize recipient. He's also the author of Exodus from Hunger and president of the nonprofit Bread for the World. He joins us now from Washington to discuss. Thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for covering the story.
Of course, and this news for 2009, the fact that food insecurity hasn't gotten any better since 2008, comes on the heels of news that the poverty rate in this country is at an all-time record high. In your opinion, is it just the state of the economy that's the biggest driver of this, or is there something else at play?
Well, even when the economy was doing all right, we had way too much hunger and poverty. What's driven hunger and poverty up is the state of the economy. It's high unemployment. That's what's driving up poverty and certainly hunger. I think actually in these new numbers, I mean, they're terrible news. It's 1 in 4 kids in our country that lives in a household that sometimes runs out of food. But it could be worse. I was struck that the numbers did not increase from the end of 2008 to the end of 2009. And I think that's very clearly because the recovery bill, the stimulus package, included some improvements in tax credits for the working poor. Mm-hmm. It also, they increased the benefit level for the food stamp program. And I think if it hadn't been for those actions, clearly we would have seen a big increase in hunger from last year to this year.
David, you're an economist. You also spent 15 years at the World Bank, and your approach to solving the hunger crisis in this country is not necessarily through charity or charitable giving. You say the more effective way to do this is through pressuring lawmakers, through changing laws in this country. What needs to change?
Well, it's just both. I think what we do through food charities and so forth, all that's really important. But all the food charities in the country amount to about 1/16 of the food that poor people get through the federal nutrition programs, WIC and school lunches and so forth. So if we want to overcome hunger and poverty, we really do also need to get Congress and the President to do their part. And in the next couple weeks, they've got to do 2 things that are really important to hungry kids in this country. One is they've got to finalize the Child Nutrition Act. That'll determine whether we provide better school lunches for our kids. And then also as they consider taxes, it looks like everybody's going to get their current tax benefits extended. And it's really important that include the working poor. If Congress would omit them from the tax bill that they're going to be passing in the next few weeks, that in itself would push a million more kids into poverty next year.
And when it comes to farming, I've spent a lot of time in Detroit looking at the urban farming push in the city of Detroit, and it's happening across America. Are urban farms part of the solution, or a large part of the solution to this crisis? Because if you put those in areas where people are the most desperate for food and healthy food, then don't you solve a lot of the problem?
I think urban farms are great. I live in an urban area. I garden. And especially in low-income neighborhoods, they're great because people can get access to food, get healthy food. Kids learn about where their food comes from. So they are a significant part of the solution. But the bigger part of the solution is to reduce the unemployment rate and make it possible for people to earn a decent living so that people who are working are able to eat. I'm a preacher, and the Bible says if people don't work, then they shouldn't eat. And I think there's some truth in that. But if people are working, they ought to be able to eat. Mm-hmm. And in our country now, there are a lot of people who are working full-time, and they're still not able to provide food for their families. That's just wrong.
And David, you really think that the food crisis can be eliminated in this country in our lifetime?
Absolutely. Bread for the World also works on world hunger issues. So I'm struck that countries like Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Ghana, Brazil, Britain have reduced hunger and poverty over the last 2 or 3 decades. They've done it because they made a concerted effort, also in our own country. At those times when we really tried to reduce poverty, we were able to do it. Our problem has been that we haven't made a sustained effort to reduce hunger and poverty. It is clearly feasible in the USA that all our kids would have enough to eat. That's very doable. You know, we know how to make sandwiches for kids, and it's just inexcusable that 1 in 4 kids in our country is living in a household that sometimes runs out of food. This can get fixed.
And I know
it wouldn't even cost very much.
And David, I know you lobby Congress hard on this issue. If you were sitting in front of Congress right now, or say President Obama and soon-to-be House Speaker John Boehner, what would be the one message you would send to them?
Well, I think reducing hunger, certainly among kids, is a bipartisan issue. It is bad economic management to let so many children in the U.S. grow up in hunger. A 2-year-old who does not eat all the time will be permanently damaged. That will damage our economy for the next 60 years. So President Obama and Mr. Boehner work together to overcome childhood hunger. This is something we can do. We ought to do it together.